From the station working for you, this is WRTV News at 5:30, streaming now.
Now at 5:30, absentee voting has never been more relevant. What you need to know to mail in your vote. And it's the most valid excuse ever not to make an event. But amid COVID-19, one company is still having a tough time satisfying customers. The StubHub alert you need to hear.
Topping our lineup on this Tuesday, new data says not only which places may be the healthiest to live, but where COVID is likely not to be as widespread. The simple ways to improve any neighborhood's health. And virtual learning is making college even more of a challenge for some first-generation students. How one group is working to connect students with the technology they may be missing. And sports physicals haven't been happening across the country because of the pandemic. What kids could be missing there and how these screenings could be changing going forward.
Today is National Voter Registration Day. The deadline to register in Indiana is October 5th. If you want to vote in the November election, state and local officials say absentee voting will be used much more this year than in the past due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They also say if you plan to vote absentee in the general election, it may be trickier than when you mailed in your ballot for the June primary. As of right now, in order to vote absentee, one of the following must apply to you. You have a specific, reasonable excuse why you will be absent from the county on Election Day. You have a disability. You are at least 65 years old. You have official election duties outside of your voting precinct, or if you are scheduled to work during the entire 12 hours that the polls are open. You can also vote by mail if you or someone you care for is sick or injured, if you are prevented from voting because of a religious discipline or religious holiday, or if you are a participant in the state's address confidentiality program. Lastly, you can vote absentee if you are a member of the military or a public safety officer, if you are a serious sex offender, or if you are prevented from voting due to the unavailability of transportation to the polls. For everything else you need to know to get ready for the general election, just go to WRTV.com/vote. In 2020. I'm going to just vote for this weather to just keep on going, Kevin.
We've been on, well, we're in a holding pattern. We're in cruise control, I guess is one way to put it. There will be a slight bump in the road as we get to the weekend, but that would be a good one with some rain. We certainly need that. The closest rain is around Memphis, Tennessee, Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and this area of high pressure is suppressing that to the south. That's why our rain chances are minimal with Beta, the remnants of the tropical storm, because high pressure will keep most of that moisture away from central Indiana. Indy's at 75, Kokomo 3 degrees warmer. Notice the wind is negligible, not a big deal, generally out of the southwest or west. Temperatures this evening a little bit warmer than we have been. Most areas will stay in the lower 50s for overnight temperatures. Tomorrow we'll make our move slowly to 69 by late morning. Back into the mid to upper 70s with a decent amount of cloud cover, these mid to high level clouds dominating, but that comes without rain. We'll talk about the next several days and the pattern beyond the 7-day forecast. I'll talk about that as well. Coming up.
Well, today several former federal judges are asking Senate leaders to delay the consideration of a Supreme Court nominee until inauguration. These judges were appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents. They warn that confirming a Supreme Court justice before then could, quote, diminish the public's faith in the institution. Utah Senator Mitt Romney said he does support filling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat. 2 other GOP senators have opposed a vote before the election. The president plans to announce his nominee on Saturday. The president said it will be a woman and she will be conservative. Now, if the nominee goes through, it would create a new Supreme Court majority of 6-3, conservative to liberal. That sets up talk about many issues, but one of the most notable, abortion. But the Roe v. Wade debate isn't all about the Supreme Court.
Enough lower courts have not decided what they think about this. The Supreme Court, doesn't like to lead on a particular issue until the lower courts, who've had trials and so on, have thought about it.
Now, under a conservative majority, the Supreme Court has ruled on an abortion case. Conservative Chief Justice Roberts sided with a ruling that kept abortion clinics open by not requiring abortion doctors to have nearby hospital admitting privileges. The High Court already ruled on a similar case out of Texas.
There is a special doctrine called stare decisis, which means when you have a case and it's like a previous case, you look to that previous case and say, how did that come out? And unless there's a very, very strong reason to change that decision, you follow precedent. You follow what happened the last time this issue came up.
Professor Carol Sanger says enough lower courts have to rule and be split on the decision to eventually make it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court would also need to decide that it wants to take up Roe v. Wade before the courts below them. Now, Sanger believes that is unlikely to happen.
It seems pretty clear that he doesn't want to be known as the guy who had Roe knocked out under his Chief Justiceship.
She's talking about Chief Justice John Roberts. Now, for other justices like Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, well, they said they accepted Roe v. Wade as the law of the land during their nomination hearings. Sanger says just because the justices on the court change, it does not mean they will change laws all over again. All right, next in our lineup, new data shows not only which places may be healthiest to live, but where COVID is likely not to be as widespread.
This is the news at 5:30 on WRTV. School is finally back in session for students in Indianapolis public schools, but some of them may be dealing with an internet outage as they continue to learn at home. This morning, IPS had a 2-hour delay to the start of the school day because district internet services were down. Then just before noon, classes were canceled for the rest of the day. The school district says damage to its internet provider's fiber optic cables caused the technical issues. The provider is working on fixing the problem, and IPS is working on guidance for families trying to figure out how their students can make up today's lessons. Chris.
Researchers believe college reopenings may be to blame for tens of thousands of additional coronavirus cases. Researchers at 3 universities think about 3,200 daily cases would not have happened had schools not physically reopened. There was also a spike in cases in communities where students moved back near campus, even if they were taking online classes. The biggest uptick was near schools with in-person classes. Los Alamos County, New Mexico, ranked the healthiest community in America. 6 of the top 10 counties were in Colorado and 2 in Virginia. U.S. News uses public health data and information from health insurance company Aetna. Now, access to healthy food, clean water, healthcare, school, and law enforcement spending are all considered in this. And there are also some new components like evictions and how well people are coping with economic changes. Now, in most cases, the higher the health ranking, the better the area did with COVID.
What helped them do better is if they had an infrastructure that was able to handle the pandemic, i.e. like access to hospitals, access to emergency rooms, and access to healthcare in general.
Now, better educated and physically healthy populations coped better with the virus, and those are 2 areas where there are historic racial disparities.
The counties that tend to be ranked at the top tend to be whiter. And that corresponds with, higher income, corresponds with higher education. So it's really difficult to find a majority minority county that's actually doing pretty good in our measures.
Now, counties that moved up in rankings spent more on health infrastructure, counties near big suburbs that brought in more jobs. Well, there are also some simpler ways to improve community health.
A couple of years ago during our first launch, I went out to Tazewell County in central Illinois. And it splits between Tazewell County and Peoria. One county, Peoria City, was not doing so well. Tazewell County, much, much better. And it's because they had developed a system of parks and walkable locations.
That county also managed to improve its rank by bringing down the teen pregnancy rate through a school education program. Well, we do have more to get to on our lineup. Virtual learning is making college even more of a challenge for some first-generation students. How one group is working to connect students with the technology that they're missing. A Massachusetts school district is waiting to see how many students test positive for coronavirus. This after one student came to school after testing positive. Almost 30 teens had to go into quarantine. Lindsay Boach shows you the legal ramifications that you could face if you knowingly expose others to COVID-19.
The student in question reportedly got the positive test results back on the 11th, a Friday, and still went to school on Monday. We spoke with Mike Lawler, an associate professor of criminal justice at the University of New Haven. He says there are 2 types of law that could be at play: criminal and civil. If someone actually gets infected and you can trace it back to a specific exposure where the person knew, then that would be a case of reckless endangerment.
Almost every state has a law like this. On top of that, if you could show that people intentionally did this, and it's certainly conceivable that someone intentionally tried to expose other people to the virus. If you can show that they actually got the virus, then that would be an assault.
But Lawler says whether criminally prosecuting is a good idea or not is debatable. What's more likely, a civil case in the form of negligence or willful misconduct.
This does have a cost when you do it, right? There's an emergency cleaning operation that has to take place. You know, these other students have to be provided for in distance learning. And if anybody were to be able to demonstrate that they were exposed and became positive, you know, the health consequences of that could be very significant.
He says either way, in this case, both the student and the parents run the risk of a criminal prosecution. I'm Lindsay Boach reporting.
Lindsay, thank you. And there's some new safety guidance for Halloween. CDC says traditional trick-or-treating is high risk. It suggests leaving goodie bags at the end of the driveway or the yard. And instead of large parties, agency recommends virtual costume contests. Now, Halloween masks, important to note, those are not substitutes for cloth ones. Wearing both the same at the same time really could also affect breathing. Now, visiting a haunted forest or maybe a pumpkin patch, something like that, that's okay, as long as there is social distancing and mask use is enforced. Now, if you haven't already signed up to vote, now is a good time to do it. It's National Voter Registration Day, and social media companies are joining the cause. Twitter users will notice a prompt to register on their timeline today, and Facebook is estimating it's already helped register 2.5 million voters across its platforms.
The NFL, Major League Baseball, and most concerts have been giving ticket refunds to fans this year, but that's not the case for many people who bought tickets through one popular ticket site. Consumer reporter John Matarese shares one couple's frustration so you don't waste your money.
With thousands of concerts canceled this year and now NFL games playing with no fans, you would think getting refunds to a canceled event would be easy. Not if you bought from StubHub. Kelly Relly doesn't go to many concerts in a good year, preferring to tend to her garden. So when StubHub offered her and her husband vouchers, not a refund, for a canceled Foo Fighters concert, she said that made no sense during a pandemic.
Kind of awkward, you know, COVID and all that. I think they should return us our money.
Kelly and Tom paid $800 for the now canceled concert. StubHub, which originally offered refunds for cancellations, is now offering only vouchers worth 125% of what customers paid.
Big company, and they didn't provide the service that we paid for.
Like so many other people, Tom and Kelly have no idea when they're going to go to another concert, maybe next year, maybe not for 2 years. They said they would just like the money back.
Because there's no concerts going on right now.
The problem? StubHub is a reseller and doesn't have the cash. The original buyer has the money. StubHub's president told Axios in normal times he would take the risk of giving refunds to buyers before recouping the same refund from the seller. But these are unprecedented times. We have sent the Rellies information on to StubHub management in the chance they can make an exception. Otherwise, their only hope may be one of several class action lawsuits now pending over this new policy.
They have to make money, I understand that, but they're a pretty big business, and we're just little people that just want our money back.
Thousands of customers like the Rellies are now sitting on vouchers with no idea if they'll ever use them. As always, don't waste your money. I'm John Matarese, WRTV.
All it takes is a little walk through your yard, and you know how dry it is. You can hear it, a little crunchy, and you can see it, how brown. Now, this is just for the month of September, a couple inches below average. But if you look at the year, we're still above average for the year. But as always, you know, we're never in a state of perfection very long. It's either too warm, too dry, too wet. You get it. We'll get back to good conditions at some point here, but nothing in the near term suggests that we're going to break the dry or drought conditions. 75, that's our temperature. The wind is light, humidity 41%. It's low. Temperature trend, if this is the average line, will be a little above average as we go into the weekend. Our temperatures will actually peak first half of the weekend on Saturday. We'll change the trend, though. You begin to see comes down on Sunday, but you'll notice a difference early next week. Humidity pretty non-existent next couple of days. It's Friday and Saturday. Humidity comes up with the surge of warmer temperatures. Tomorrow, again, mid to high level clouds kind of shrouding the sun through the day. Temperature as we get at noon tomorrow, 72, upper 70s for that afternoon high. Thursday, again, cloud cover around. Any showers would be closer to the Ohio River. We'll look at your 3 to 4 day forecast when I come back in just a bit.
Many college students are supposed to be going back to school behind a screen, but they don't have the essential tools to get by, like laptops or even the internet. As Amanda Brandeis reports, supply chains are strained as schools scramble to secure more devices.
The pathway to higher education has never been without barriers, but trying to break through them during a pandemic can crack an already fragile foundation.
I'm doing everything for my family so that they can feel proud of me, and I can keep going forward and get a good job so that I don't end up in the fields.
While long hours can reap little reward for migrant farm workers, many work in hopes to pass down a better life for their children.
My name is Maria Salvador. I'm 19 years old.
Born in the central coast of California, Maria's parents came here from Oaxaca, Mexico.
They always tell me we have to keep studying, we have to keep learning and keep growing so that we can get a good job, so that we don't suffer the way they suffered.
But that studying made more difficult by the lack of access to a laptop.
It was always hard because since I would use my mom's cell phone sometimes, she would take it with her, and sometimes I couldn't do my homework.
And when the pandemic derailed her final months of high school, Maria and her sister worked in the fields to help their family.
With the whole pandemic came a lot of financial hardships for families where there wasn't before.
Sonia Zapian Torres works to get these students from the fields to college.
They might not understand what are the requirements again to graduate high school. You know, what classes do I need to take?
She says virtual learning has made that process a lot harder.
I would definitely want to be on campus.
A week after classes began, the organization Mixteco was able to secure Maria a laptop. But it's an issue not unique to just her.
Our students are not only falling behind, but then they're getting graded for not showing up to these virtual classes where it's really not even up to them, right?
Maria's school, Oxnard College, found 20% of its students don't have access to internet, basic software programs, or computers. They serve a population that's 60% first-generation students. But despite the challenges, they've been able to fulfill every laptop request.
And they see the struggles of their families, and working in the field is not something that they want to do.
While the job of advocates has grown more complicated, they say their efforts matter more now than ever before. In Oxnard, California, I'm Amanda Brandeis reporting.
Amanda, thank you. And around the country, the laptop supply chain is struggling to keep up with this boom in demand. Research group NPD Group reports that laptop sales grew 50% this summer. Schools and families are dealing with shipping delays, limited selections, and higher than usual technology costs. Now, a tragic loss has a new father speaking out on the racial disparities in healthcare. Bruce McIntyre says while his partner was pregnant, her doctor visits were virtual because of the pandemic. Now, she voiced concerns, but no one listened. Then her platelet levels dropped and she died during a C-section. Now he is raising their son on his own.
She advocated for herself and she advocated for other women. So I feel like that's something that I have to carry on. I feel like that's something I have to continue for her and Elias.
The CDC says black mothers are 3 to 4 times more likely to die giving birth than white mothers. Researchers have found 60% of all pregnancy-related deaths can be prevented with access to stable housing, transportation, and better health care. All right, finally in our lineup today, sports physicals haven't been happening across the country because of the pandemic. We're going to talk about what kids could be missing and how these screenings could be changing going forward. A new study says those who have COVID but no symptoms, well, that doesn't mean that there's less of the virus in your system. The journal Thorax says asymptomatic people are playing a key role in spreading this virus. Now, flying may have many people concerned, but there's an Italian airline that says it will test flights where passengers are guaranteed to not get COVID. How can they do that? Well, the flights between Rome and Milan will have passengers that will confirm that they have tested negative for the virus. Some students are getting back to playing sports without a checkup with a doctor. The National Federation of State High School Associations estimates half of states are relaxing requirements on timing for physicals. Now, that decision goes back to the early days of the pandemic when kids left school and didn't go back before summer.
We knew there would be a real shortage of access for kids to get into doctors' offices. So we saw some of our state associations say we're going to waive it this year for an annual requirement. And then in the states where it's every 2 years or 3 years, they really haven't made any changes at this point.
Now, physicals can help with mental health, substance abuse, and also can check for physical issues, including basic vitals, pre-existing conditions, family history. A lot of things go into it. Now, despite schools allowing for more flexibility, the American Academy of Pediatrics still recommends that parents maintain healthcare visits for their kids.
It hasn't been a pass where, because of COVID, we just don't have to worry about it this year. There are still a lot of developmental changes that occur between, specifically, we're talking about high school athletes, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. There's so much development that goes on.
Now, once normal physical requirements resume, both organizations say there may be changes to screenings because of COVID. Doctors will be paying attention to the impact of the virus on heart and lung functions long term. Well, the number of so-called long haulers is growing. Now, these are people still suffering from COVID symptoms months after their initial diagnosis. So tomorrow, we're taking a look at the new work that doctors are doing to figure out what's going on.
The thermometers pretty much had our undivided attention here over the last month or so because we haven't needed to stare at radar, that's for sure. Back to staring at the thermometer tomorrow. 79 with hazy sunshine Thursday. More clouds, could have a shower south, and I would say south of Bedford and Seymour. And Friday will end the work week with temperatures right at 80 degrees. We'll talk about our chances for rain coming up in the next half hour. The news at 6.